Political postmortem already underway. Glenn Youngkin was successful at pushing the culture wars during the campaign. Crystal, like I said, you were with us late last night. What was your takeaway from what you saw?
Well, Dell, if I were a weather woman, I would say last night was rainy with a, side of thunderstorms as the Democrats are really headed into a hurricane moving into the 2022 midterm elections. What we saw in Virginia with, former Governor Terry McAuliffe was really just an opportunity for him to win, but it was also his to lose. His messaging was off. His ability to resonate with voters, it did not stick. And what we're seeing in New Jersey is a really even tighter race around Murphy, who is a sitting, Democratic governor who's really facing down the barrel of losing his election, his reelection. And so the question becomes, what did the Democrats do? How did they go about protecting their base? How did they go about speaking to their voters, making sure everyone knew that these elections are important leading into the midterm elections? And what can they do to reassess so that we don't have this particular slaughterhouse next year? And then moving into 2024, the presidential election, that's something we also have to be concerned about. And so last night was really just a preview of a bad weather storm that the Democrats are heading themselves into.
Mr. Simon, one of the things that I love about Democrats after elections is that they kill themselves. I mean, they just beat themselves to death. After Hillary Clinton lost, people said, how could she possibly lose? And then finally people got around to the issue of, well, maybe it was just a bad campaign. Did Glenn Youngkin win, or did Terry McAuliffe simply run a bad campaign? Because the one thing that he never said was, what do you have to lose with me? Because I've already been governor, and guess what? The state's still standing.
Well, first off, it was a close race. So it wasn't like Youngkin won a landslide. And Terry McAuliffe had a record. Youngkin did not. So there was no record for him to run on. It's like a quarterback that you don't have game tape on. So I don't view it as a catastrophe, but I do think it's a lesson for Democrats that if you represent to your key constituency, and that being African Americans, that you're going to go hard on the issues that are important to them, then make them a priority and follow through on it. But also, you have to have the votes. So there's a degree of practicality in this. And that's where we need a nation that is more bipartisan versus the factionalization that we're witnessing today.
Christina, I live in Northern Virginia, and I have been pointing out on this broadcast and other broadcasts that when the Capitol was stormed on January 6th, the people who were inside Congress live in the suburbs of Washington. They were waiting for their loved ones to get home. They were praying that their loved ones would make it out safely. When you don't see aggressive prosecutions among African American voters who know that if those had been blacks on Capitol Hill, a lot of people saying they would not have even survived the assault itself, there was anger and apathy among black voters that went far beyond critical race theory and some of the issues that a lot of the white pundits are talking about.
Absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, the question that people ask themselves when they go vote is, am I happy right now? Are my needs being met? And I don't just think that it's black people. Obviously, black folks and people of color specifically, when they ask themselves that question, um, it's more likely for it to be no because our needs are the last to be met. But in this sort of situation, I think white people also ask themselves that question. The question that I keep asking myself in this sort of situation, when there are dog whistles, are there circumstances that lead white people to listen to those dog whistles more? If they are unhappy, if they have bad jobs, if they are not being taken care of, if promises are not being met, are they more likely to listen to those types of dog whistles like what we saw in Virginia around critical race theory? And if they had been happy, if the Democratic Party, if the ruling party had been pushing forward the promises that they made when elected, if we had increased the minimum wage, if we had canceled student loan debt, would they have listened to these racist dog whistles, or would they have actually paid attention to the quality of life?
Crystal, I think that Christina is tapping into something that I have argued about this particular race for a long time, which is that Virginia is a big state and it is a multicultural state, but it also has a different set of problems depending on which part of the state you are. If you live in Northern Virginia, your roads are paved. I mean, you might as well be looking at streets of gold. But if you look at some of the areas south of Richmond, near Petersburg, et cetera, the closer you get to the North Carolina line, the closer you get to the regions in Southwest Virginia on the West Virginia-Kentucky border, you're looking at pockets of poverty that are waiting for their pockets of gold too. Is it time for Democrats to try and embrace a strategy that might really try and include all of those counties that Terry McAuliffe lost?
Absolutely. And that's something that the conservatives, Republicans have done for years. It's a tried and tested Republican playbook strategy to really play to rule voters, whereas Democrats tend to, center ourselves around the urban centers and the suburban centers around these larger cities. But what we're doing, we're missing voters who maybe they don't vote in every single election, but they're inspired by a candidacy of a Trump or a Trump like person. And so when you have a governor, a former governor of a state like Virginia, who clearly should know the state and know where the pockets of voters are, you have to ask yourself, did McCullough do enough to reach out beyond his traditional base of folks? Did he do more to engage many of the folks on the outskirts of the state to make sure that they felt engaged? Did he send them a message about what another future in Virginia would look like under his governorship? That's something that he did not do, and it's something that the larger Democratic Party needs to embrace as we're moving into the 2022 midterm elections.
Mr. Simon, are Democrats afraid of white voters? We often hear Democrats say that Republicans are afraid of black voters, but I had a friend in Kansas City, Big Jim. If you saw him, you would basically think that he belonged to a motorcycle gang, and that's because he usually was an extra in Hollywood movies on motorcycle gangs. One of the nicest people you'd ever meet, but if you saw him in a shopping mall, you would say, that's not somebody I want to have a conversation with. When will Democrats reach out to those Republicans in those regions and understand that they have some of the same issues that Democratic voters do?
Well, you're sounding like Barack Obama. We have more in common than we have apart. African Americans have fought in every war in this country's history. We built this country. We are a part of this country. And the messaging has to be more inclusive, but also making it clear that what is good for the African American community politically, economically, criminal law or law enforcement is good for America. It's not just benefiting one particular community. And I think the Democrats have to do a better job in utilizing the dog whistle when needed, understanding that, I can get more bees with honey than vinegar. And I think that is something that we'll see as we're moving towards the midterms. And I would expect, and I think Christina's bringing up some very good points, but progressives need to come along there and understand that a position sounds good, but if you don't have the votes, then you're going to have to modify that position. I think that's what President Biden is saying.
Christina, I want to leave you with the last word on this, and I'll give you a football analogy. I hate the New England Patriots, only because I'm a Steelers fan. So don't get mad at me, New England Patriots fans. But you got to admire Tom Brady. But I remember a game in which they were getting their clocks cleaned at halftime, and I was basically putting away the hot dogs, the tacos, and all the other things that you have for the Super Bowl. And then lo and behold, Tom Brady comes out and wins the DAMN game. I don't know if you can spell it, if it makes a big difference. But that being said, are Democrats sort of like that halftime show where all of a sudden they were spiking the football in Washington before they had actually won the game?
I don't think they were winning the first half. It's not like they relaxed during halftime, like, oh, we got this. I don't think they did anything in the first half to prove they got it at all. Like, what have they passed? This bill that they're still arguing about, the Build Back Better, this is something that could have been passed in the summer, and they're still arguing about it now in November. We finished this term in December. I'm not sure what's actually going to be happening. So I don't see them actually delivering on any of the promises they said that they would. And a lot of the promises that they said they deliver on are things that benefit the base but also might bring people over from the center side because these are things that benefit working class folks up and down the bill, regardless of partisanship. And I think that we should really be paying attention to what's happening with working class folks, with all the strikes that are happening across the country, to really listen to what people are saying. So they want better rights as workers, they want better wages, they want health care, they want paid parental leave, and they are stopping work altogether until they get those things. And Democrats need to be the party that deliver that, because we know that Republicans will never be the ones that do that. If we are able to come together to do that for folks in the working class, we will continue to win in midterms and in the next presidential race.
Just in case you're curious, our crack team here tells me that the Build Back Better plan was introduced in June, but maybe this week there's going to be a vote. But then again, they said that last week, and then they said that. But anyway, Christina, Crystal, Timothy, thanks for being with us.